They thought I was the fool falling apart while they carried on behind my back. Neither of them knew I'd already placed hidden cameras in our home 3 weeks earlier. The footage revealed a betrayal deeper than infidelity, and a truth that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 5 years of marriage to Daniel had given me everything I thought I wanted: the renovated Victorian in Boston's Beacon Hill, summer weekends in Nantucket, and a husband whose architecture firm was the toast of New England's elite. From the EE, outside, Sophia and Daniel Morgan were the couple everyone envied, the Christmas card perfect couple. "You're so lucky," my sister Ava would say, eyeing the 3-carat diamond on my finger during our monthly brunches. "Daniel is literally perfect. Smart, successful, actually helps around the house." I'd smile and nod, ignoring the hollow feeling that had been growing inside me for months. The subtle shift in our marriage was hard to pinpoint, like trying to identify the exact moment when summer turns to fall. One day you're basking in warmth, the next you're reaching for a sweater without quite knowing why. Our life looked perfect on Instagram. Daniel presenting his award-winning sustainable design at the Architecture Symposium in Milan, me by his side in a designer gown, weekend sailing trips with Boston's elite, charity galas where we'd auction off his custom home designs for ridiculous sums. We were that couple, successful, attractive, enviable. But behind closed doors, something had changed. Conversation over. Dinner became perfunctory. "How was your day?" "Fine, busy, pass the salt." Sex became less frequent, more mechanical. When he touched me, it felt like he was completing a task rather than connecting with his wife. I told myself it was normal. Every marriage has phases. We were busy building our lives, our careers. Daniel's firm was expanding to the West Coast. I was considering a partnership at my law practice. We were just tired, stretched thin. Things would get better when life calmed down. April 17th was supposed to be special, our 5th anniversary. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect evening, reservations at Maison Laurent, the French restaurant where we'd had our first date, followed by a weekend getaway to the Berkshires. I'd even bought a new dress, midnight blue silk that made my eyes look almost violet in the right light. That morning, I woke early to find Daniel's side of the bed empty. A text notification lit up my phone. "Early meeting. See you tonight. Can't wait. Love you." Simple, sweet, thoughtful. I smiled, stretching lazily in our Egyptian cotton sheets, mentally reviewing my day's checklist. The florist would deliver his favorite lilies. The vintage watch I'd had engraved waited in its box, hidden in my dresser drawer. Everything was perfect until I heard the buzz. Daniel's phone, forgotten on his nightstand, vibrating with incoming messages. Once, twice. 3 times in quick succession. I shouldn't have looked. In 5 years, I'd never checked his phone. Trust was our foundation, he always said, the cornerstone of our marriage. But something, intuition, fate, divine intervention, made me reach over and pick it up. No passcode needed. His phone recognized my face, an innocent convenience for those times I needed to use his phone to call mine when it was lost in the couch cushions. The messages were from Marcus K., his business partner. "She's asking about tonight again. Says she misses you." "Don't. Forget the hotel is under her name this time." I stared at the screen, momentarily confused. Daniel didn't have any meetings scheduled with clients that evening. We had anniversary plans. Plans I'd confirmed with him multiple times. With trembling fingers, I opened the message thread, scrolling upward through weeks of exchanges. Last night was incredible. "She keeps asking questions, getting suspicious." Don't worry, she doesn't suspect anything. My stomach clenched as I realized she was me, and Marcus K. wasn't Marcus at all. When I tapped on the contact profile, there, was no photo, just initials. MK Melissa Kincaid, his 28-year-old project manager, the brilliant one he'd hired last year, the one who often called during dinner with urgent questions, the one he described as revolutionary talent and the future of the firm, the one whose name caused a slight dilation in his pupils whenever she was mentioned. I sat frozen on our custom Italian sheets, the phone growing slick in my sweating palm. My mind raced through a highlight reel of suspicious moments I'd dismissed. Daniel working late 3 nights a week. The Seattle project. It's crucial, babe. The business trips that mysteriously extended by a day or two. The client wants additional revisions. I can't say no. The new cologne he'd started wearing. It was a gift from the partners. Don't you like it? The sudden password on his laptop. Client. Confidentiality. You understand. The decrease in intimacy. I'm just stressed and tired. Each excuse now revealed itself as a carefully constructed lie, a foundation of deception as meticulously designed as any of his architectural masterpieces. Don't know how long I sat there, scrolling through months of their exchanges. Sweet nothings, inside jokes, photos I couldn't bring myself to open, plans, detailed, explicit plans for their future together. Once I'm made partner, we can figure out the next steps. She doesn't deserve this. We need to be careful. I promise by next year we'll be together officially. Next year, they were planning a life while I was planning an anniversary dinner. I should have screamed. Should have thrown the phone against the wall. Should have called Daniel and raged at him, called her and threatened her. But something cold and calculating settled over me instead. I carefully replaced the phone exactly where I'd found it. I took 3 deep breaths. And then I went to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. When I finished, I rinsed my mouth, splashed cold water on my face, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was pale but composed, wounded but not destroyed. What now? I whispered to my reflection. That's when I remembered Claire, my college roommate who'd gone through something similar last year. Her advice had seemed paranoid at the time. Document everything. Protect yourself first. Don't confront until you have all the evidence you need. Evidence. Of course. I was a lawyer, after all. Evidence was my world. I made 3 calls that morning. The first to my office, claiming a sudden illness. The second, to a private investigator recommended by a colleague, who specialized in high-asset divorces. And the third to a discreet technology company that specialized in surveillance equipment. By noon, I had a plan. By 3, I had tiny cameras installed in strategic locations throughout our home. And by 6, when Daniel texted to say he'd be working late and would miss our anniversary dinner, I had already canceled our reservations and ordered sushi for one. No problem, I texted back. We'll celebrate this weekend instead. His response came quickly. You're the best. Love you. I stared at those 3 words, once precious, now poisonous. The cameras in our bedroom, living room, and home office blinked. Silently, their tiny red lights promising something I both dreaded and needed. The truth. What they would reveal would be far worse than I imagined. And far more illuminating. I spent the next 3 weeks living a double life that would have impressed the CIA. On the surface, I was Sophia Morgan, devoted wife and successful attorney, carrying on as if my world hadn't shattered into a million jagged pieces. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, and won a major case for our biggest client. I cooked Daniel's favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, and kissed him goodnight while my skin crawled beneath his touch. You've been so understanding about missing our anniversary, he said one night over the grilled salmon I'd prepared. I promise I'll make it up to you. I smiled, thinking of the camera hidden in the decorative sconce behind his head. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Below this carefully maintained facade, I was meticulously building my case like the lawyer I'd been trained to be. Each night after Daniel fell asleep, I'd slip into my home office, lock the door, and review the footage from the day. The first few days yielded nothing significant. Daniel came home, worked in his office, watched TV, went to bed. Normal routines of a supposedly normal man. I began to wonder if their affair was conducted entirely outside our home, in hotel rooms, her apartment, his office after hours. Then came Wednesday of the second week. Daniel called to say he was working late again. At 8:42 p.m., the front door, camera activated. Daniel entered, but he wasn't alone. She was everything I wasn't. Willowy where I was curvy, blonde where I was brunette, young where I was, well, 35 isn't old, but in the presence of her 28 years, I suddenly felt ancient. "Are you sure she won't be home?" Melissa asked, eyes darting nervously around our foyer. Daniel pulled her close, kissing her with a passion I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Positive. She has dinner with her sister every Wednesday. Won't be back until at least 10. At least 10. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did have dinner with Ava most Wednesdays, a standing arrangement he'd encouraged. "You need sister time," he'd insisted. "Don't rush home on my account." How considerate of him to create space in our marriage for his affair. They moved to the living room, where Daniel poured them both generous glasses of the 18-year-old Macallan I'd given him for Christmas. My hands curled into fists as they sat on our couch, the couch where we'd spent countless nights planning our future. "Are you going to tell her soon?" Melissa asked, running her fingers through his hair the way I used to. Daniel sighed, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It's complicated, Mel. The timing has to be right. The Seattle project is going to make the firm. Once that's secure, I'll have leverage for full partnership. And then we can be together properly. No more sneaking around." He kissed her again. "She deserves the house, of course, and I'll be generous with the settlement. I'm not a monster. How magnanimous of him to plan my consolation prize while he built a new life with my replacement. What if she fights it?" Melissa asked. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, and the sound cut through me like a serrated blade. "Sophia? She won't. She's reasonable, practical, always has been. It's one of the things that made her a good wife. Made, past tense. In his mind, our marriage was already over. Besides," he continued, "what would she fight for? We don't have kids, thank God. The prenup protects the firm, and she makes good money at her law practice. She'll be fine." I watched as they finished their drinks and moved upstairs to our bedroom. The bedroom where Daniel and I had spent our first night as husband and wife, where we'd talked about having children someday, where I'd nursed him through a brutal flu. Last winter, I couldn't bring myself to watch what happened next. Some wounds were too deep, too primal to witness. I closed the laptop, but not before setting the footage to automatically save to the secure cloud server my PI had recommended. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, waited until Daniel left, and then scrubbed our bedroom like Lady Macbeth. I changed the sheets, flipped the mattress, and threw away the decorative pillows Melissa had lounged against. I couldn't burn the bed frame, a handcrafted wedding gift from Daniel's parents, but I wanted to. That night, I told Daniel I had a migraine and slept in the guest room. "Do you need anything?" he asked, the perfect concerned husband. "I can. Get your medication." I waved him away, wondering how he could lie so effortlessly, wondering if anything in our 5 years had been real. The cameras continued their silent vigil. I documented each of Melissa's visits to our home, 3 more over the next 2 weeks, always on nights when Daniel thought I would be out. I recorded their conversations about their future together, about the problematic prenuptial agreement that protected Daniel's interest in the firm but not his personal assets, about how to break the news to me gently. But the most revealing footage didn't involve Melissa at all. It was a Monday evening, and I had legitimately stayed late at the office, working on a complex merger agreement. Daniel didn't know I was accessing the home cameras remotely from my work computer. I watched him pace our living room on the phone, agitated in a way I'd never seen him. "James, I'm telling you, the numbers aren't adding up," he said to his business partner. "The Seattle investors are asking questions I can't answer." He ran his hand through his hair, a tell I recognized from our poker nights with friends. Daniel was nervous. No, more than nervous. Terrified. "We need to move some money around before the quarterly audit. Yes, I know it's not strictly above board, but we don't have a choice unless you want to explain to the board how we lost $6 million on that riverfront development." I sat up straight in my office chair. $6 million? The riverfront project was supposed to be the firm's crowning achievement, a sustainable mixed-use development that had garnered international attention. "Look, just do what we discussed. Move the funds from the pension account temporarily. We'll replace it once the Seattle deal closes. Yes, I know it's illegal. Do you have a better idea?" Pension account. That was the retirement fund for their employees. I felt sick as the implications became clear. Daniel and James weren't just having cash flow problems, they were planning to commit fraud. "Just take care of it, and make sure Melissa doesn't find out. She's been asking to see the complete books, and I keep putting her off. She's too straight-laced for this." Well, that was ironic. Apparently, his mistress had more integrity than he did when it came to business ethics. And for God's sake, delete this message and any emails about this. If this gets out, we're not just looking at bankruptcy, we're looking at prison. I sat in my darkened office, staring at the screen long after Daniel had ended the call. My husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal, and he had just handed me everything I needed. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his even breathing, wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully while their world teetered on the edge of collapse. I thought about confronting him, about screaming and throwing things and demanding explanations. But the lawyer in me knew better. The wounded wife wanted vengeance, but the strategic attorney recognized something more valuable: leverage. I needed more evidence, more documentation, more ammunition. So I continued my charade of ignorance, all while the cameras recorded Daniel's increasingly frantic attempts to patch the holes in his sinking ship. By the end of the third week, I had compiled a devastating dossier. Evidence of the affair, complete, with timestamps and locations, recordings of multiple conversations about financial fraud, emails Daniel had sent from our home computer discussing wire transfers and creative accounting practices. I made copies of everything, one set for my attorney, one for my sister in case anything happened to me, and one locked in a safety deposit box at a bank Daniel knew nothing about. Then I called Lisa Chen, the best divorce attorney in Boston, and, fortunately, someone I'd helped win a significant case last year. I laid out everything I'd discovered and asked for her advice. "Don't confront him yet," she said after reviewing my evidence. "Let me do some digging into the firm's financials first. If what you've recorded is accurate, we're looking at significant leverage in divorce proceedings, prenup notwithstanding." I nodded, relieved to have a battle plan. "And Sophia," she added, her voice softening, "I'm sorry this is happening to you. But I have to say, I've never had a client come to me this well prepared. You've given yourself options many people in your situation never have. Options? Yes." What had begun as a desperate attempt to understand my husband's betrayal had evolved into something else entirely. A strategic operation to ensure my future, and perhaps the futures of everyone else Daniel was preparing to sacrifice, on the altar of his ambition. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop to check the cameras one last time before bed. Daniel was in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, face pale with stress. "Tomorrow," he was saying. "We need to move the money tomorrow before the auditors arrive. And James? Make sure there's no paper trail." I closed the laptop and smiled for the first time in weeks. Daniel had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, indeed. I awoke the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. While Daniel showered, I checked my phone to find a message from Lisa Chen. Meeting set with financial forensics specialist, 2 p.m. today. Can you make it? I replied with a simple yes and began preparing for what would likely be the most important day of my professional and personal life. You look nice, Daniel commented as I selected a tailored charcoal suit and crimson blouse, my power outfit, for difficult court appearances. Big case today? You could say that, I replied, watching his reflection in the mirror as I applied my makeup with careful precision. One I intend to win. He kissed the top of my head, a gesture that once made me feel cherished and now made my skin crawl, before grabbing his briefcase. That's my girl, always the fighter. If only he knew exactly what I was fighting for. Dinner tonight? He asked at the door. I should be home by 7. I smiled, thinking of the cameras that had recorded his identical promise to Melissa just yesterday. I'll be here. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I called Ava. It's time, I said when she answered. Can you meet me at Lisa's office at 2? I'll cancel my afternoon appointments, she replied without hesitation. Are you okay? Was I? The strange thing was, I actually felt stronger than I had in months. I'm better than okay, I told her. I'm finally taking control. I spent the morning reviewing the most damning evidence one last time, organizing it chronologically in a folder labeled simply Daniel Morgan Documentation, Professional, Clinical. As if he were just another case instead of the man I'd once believed would be the father of my children. At 1:45, I walked into Lisa Chen's corner office on the 32nd floor of Boston's financial district. The view of the harbor was spectacular, but I barely noticed it. Ava was already there, along with a stern-looking man in his 60s, who Lisa introduced as Howard Keller, forensic accountant and expert witness in over 200 financial fraud cases. Mrs. Morgan has provided some concerning evidence, Lisa began, pressing a button that lowered privacy blinds over the glass walls of her office. But before we proceed, I want to confirm your objectives here, Sophia. I straightened in my chair. I want a divorce, obviously. I want what I'm entitled to from our marital assets. And I want to ensure that whatever Daniel and James are doing at the firm doesn't destroy innocent people's lives. Howard raised an eyebrow. The pension fund manipulation you recorded is extraordinarily serious. If they're doing what you suspect, we're talking about federal crimes. I understand, I said, feeling the weight of what I was setting in motion. But there are 38 employees at that firm whose retirement savings are at risk, not to mention the investors being misled. About the Seattle project. Lisa nodded. I've reviewed the audio recordings. If authenticated, they constitute compelling evidence of intent to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and possibly embezzlement. I'm not just trying to hurt Daniel, I added, though part of me, a dark, wounded part I barely recognized, wanted exactly that. This is about doing what's right. Howard opened his laptop and began typing. Based on what you've provided, I can initiate discrete inquiries into the firm's financial records. With your permission, I'd also like to examine your joint financial statements for the past 5 years. I handed him a flash drive. Everything's there. Tax returns, investment accounts, property deeds, credit card statements. I've been very thorough. Impressively so, Lisa commented. For the next hour, we developed a strategy that felt more like planning a military operation than preparing for a divorce. Howard would investigate the financial irregularities, while Lisa drafted initial divorce papers. I would continue gathering evidence while maintaining the facade of an oblivious wife. And when do I confront him? I asked as our meeting wound down. Lisa and Howard exchanged glances. That depends on what we find in the financials, Lisa replied carefully. If the fraud is as extensive as you suspect, we may need to consider approaching the SEC or FBI before confronting Daniel. The room fell silent as the implications settled over us. This was no longer just about a cheating husband. This was about potential criminal charges, public scandal, and the collapse of everything Daniel had built. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "About how far I'm willing to go." Ava, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "Soph, he betrayed you in every possible way. He doesn't deserve your protection." "It's not about what he deserves," I replied. "It's about what I can live with." As I left Lisa's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Meeting running late. Might not make 7. Start without me? Love you." I almost laughed at the predictability of it all. Another lie, another night with Melissa, another "love you." That meant absolutely nothing. But when I checked the home cameras from my phone, I was surprised to see that Daniel wasn't with Melissa at all. He was in his home office, surrounded by stacks of papers, looking more stressed than I'd ever seen him. James was there too, their voices too low for the camera's microphone to pick up clearly. I needed to hear what they were saying. Instead of heading home, I drove to a small cafe several blocks away, opened my laptop, and accessed the higher quality camera feed. I ordered a coffee and plugged in my earbuds, suddenly grateful for the background noise of the busy cafe that would mask whatever I was about to hear. "Auditors found the discrepancies," James was saying, his face ashen. "They're requesting additional documentation for the last 3 quarters. Daniel loosened his tie, a vein pulsing visibly in his forehead. "What exactly did they find?" "The transfers, Dan. The ones to and from the pension account. They're asking specifically about those." "That's impossible. I handled those personally. There was no trail." James slammed his fist on the desk. "Well, they found something. And now they're talking about bringing in outside consultants." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Daniel paced the room, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. "We need to stay calm. Maybe it's just routine. They don't have enough to—" "Melissa knows." Daniel froze mid-stride. "What?" "She accessed the complete book somehow. Came to me this morning asking about the discrepancies in the pension fund. I tried to put her off, but she's not stupid, Dan. She knows something's wrong." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing specific, but she's threatening to go to the board if we don't give her answers by tomorrow." James collapsed into a chair. "We're screwed. Completely screwed." Daniel was silent for a long moment, then reached for his phone. "I'll handle Melissa. You need to get those documents we discussed, the ones in the safe at your place." "The offshore account paperwork?" "Dan, if anyone finds those, no one will find them if we destroy them. Do it tonight." I watched, oddly detached, as my husband methodically planned to obstruct justice and silence his mistress-turned-whistleblower. The man on my screen was a stranger, calculating, desperate, dangerous. I closed the laptop, my coffee untouched, and cold. This had just become much more complex than a simple divorce. People's livelihoods were at stake, possibly even their safety, if Daniel was willing to go to such lengths to cover his tracks. I called Lisa. "I just witnessed Daniel and James discussing document destruction and silencing a potential whistleblower. How quickly can we move on this?" Her response was immediate and grave. "Come back to my office. Now. And Sophia? Don't go home. Not until we figure this out." As I drove back to the financial district, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Daniel. "Might be later than expected. Don't wait up. Work crisis. We'll explain everything tomorrow." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to the man I'd married. Instead, I called Ava and asked her to grab the emergency bag I'd packed and hidden in my closet 3 days earlier. Clothes, toiletries, and essential documents I might need if things went sideways. Back in Lisa's office, now joined by 2 grim-faced, Men she introduced as former FBI agents who now consulted on financial crime cases. I played the latest recording. Their reactions confirmed what I already knew. This situation had moved beyond a private marital dispute into potential criminal territory. Based on what we're hearing, they're planning to destroy evidence tonight, the older agent Sanders observed. We need to move quickly if we're going to prevent that. What are my options? I asked. We can contact the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Lisa explained. With the evidence you've gathered, they would likely launch an immediate investigation. Or? I prompted, sensing there was an alternative. Or, Sanders continued, we can approach Melissa Kincaid directly. If she's already suspicious, she might be willing to cooperate, especially if she understands the potential consequences of being involved, however peripherally, in financial fraud. I thought about Melissa. The other woman, yes, but also potentially an unwitting pawn in Daniel's schemes. She hadn't known about the fraud, according to what I'd overheard, and now she was asking questions, becoming dangerous to Daniel. A disturbing thought crossed my mind. If Daniel's desperate enough to destroy evidence, how far might he go to silence Melissa? The room fell quiet. That's a legitimate concern, Sanders admitted. Men in his position, facing what he's facing, sometimes make catastrophic decisions. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Despite everything Melissa had done, the affair, the lies, the future she'd planned with my husband, I couldn't let her become another casualty of Daniel's selfishness. We need to warn her, I said firmly. Today. Lisa looked surprised. You want to help the woman who's been sleeping with your husband? I want to help an innocent person who might be in danger, I corrected. Whatever she did to me, she doesn't deserve what might be coming. Sanders nodded approvingly. We can arrange a meeting, somewhere public, but private enough for a sensitive conversation. I'll do it, I said, surprising even myself. I'll meet with her. Are you sure that's wise? Lisa asked. No, it probably wasn't, but something told me Melissa would be more likely to listen to me than to strangers. And time was running out. I'm sure, I replied. Set it up for tonight. And make sure she comes alone. As the others began making arrangements, I stepped to the window, gazing out at the darkening sky over Boston Harbor. Somewhere out there, Daniel was plotting his next move, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to implode, and I, the wife he had underestimated, would be the one to strike the match. The Meridian Hotel's rooftop bar offered a panoramic view of Boston's twinkling skyline, but I barely noticed it as I sipped my sparkling water, watching the elevator doors. Lisa had arranged for a private corner section, secluded enough for our conversation, but public enough to ensure safety. At precisely 9:15 p.m., the doors opened, and Melissa Kincaid stepped out. Even from a distance, I could see why Daniel had been attracted to her. She moved with natural confidence, her blonde hair gleaming under the ambient lighting, her tailored navy dress suggesting refined taste rather than obvious seduction. She scanned the bar, her expression guarded. When her eyes found mine, she faltered visibly. Of course, she recognized me. From company parties, from the framed photos in Daniel's office, perhaps even from secretly studying her competition on social media. For a moment, I thought she might turn and flee. Instead, she squared her shoulders and approached my table. Mrs. Morgan, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I didn't expect it to be you. Please, sit, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. And call me Sophia. Under the circumstances, formality seems rather pointless. She hesitated, then sank into the chair, her fingers immediately fidgeting with the stem of the martini glass Sanders had arranged to have waiting for her. I'm not here to create a scene, I began, keeping my voice neutral. I'm not here to threaten you or to demand you end your relationship with my husband. Confusion flickered across her face. Then why am I here? I leaned forward slightly. Because I believe you might be in danger, Melissa. And strangely enough, I don't want to see you hurt. She laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Is this some kind of trick? I wish it were. It would be simpler. I took a deep breath. What? Do you know about the finances at Morgan & James Architects? Her expression shifted instantly, wariness replacing confusion. Why are you asking me about the firm's finances? Because earlier today, you questioned James about discrepancies in the pension fund. And now, Daniel and James are planning to destroy documents related to offshore accounts. All color drained from her face. How could you possibly know that? Instead of answering directly, I removed a small tablet from my bag, queued up one of the recordings, and slid it across the table. I watched her expression change from skepticism to shock as she listened to Daniel and James discussing how to handle her if she continued asking questions. When the recording ended, she looked up at me with wide eyes. You've been recording? Them? For 3 weeks, since I found the text messages on our anniversary. She flinched, guilt flashing across her features. Sophia, I held up my hand. Save it. Your relationship with Daniel is actually the least of my concerns right now. What matters is that you've stumbled onto something dangerous, and you need to understand what you're dealing with. Over the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything I'd discovered: the fraudulent transfers, the misrepresented investments, the Seattle project built on financial quicksand. As I spoke, Melissa's professional training seemed to override her personal shock. She asked sharp, specific questions that confirmed my suspicions. She truly hadn't known about the fraud. I knew something felt off with the numbers, she said finally, running a hand through her hair. But I never imagined this scale of deception. That's why I needed to meet with you, I explained. Daniel is desperate. The auditors are closing in, and you're now a liability to him. You think he would hurt me? Her voice wavered for the first time. I slid the tablet back across the table, this time playing a different recording. Daniel instructing James to make sure she keeps quiet, whatever it takes. I don't know what he's capable of anymore, I admitted. The man I'm seeing in these recordings is not the man I thought I married. A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the ambient chatter of the bar and the distant sound of traffic below. What are you planning to do? She finally asked. I'm working with legal and financial experts to document everything before approaching the authorities. But my immediate concern was warning you. Melissa stared into her untouched martini. Why would you care what happens to me? I've been sleeping with your husband for months. It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly on the drive over. Because this isn't about you and me, I answered honestly. This is about right and wrong, and letting you walk into danger without warning would be wrong, regardless of our complicated connection. She looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. He told me you were cold, clinical, that your marriage had become a business arrangement. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. Of course he did. The classic justification, blame the wife. Did he also tell you I was focused on my career? That I didn't understand his vision? That I wasn't supportive enough? Her silence was confirmation enough. Classic cheater's playbook, I said, surprising myself with how little pain the words caused now. The betrayal had been processed, cataloged, and filed away, replaced with a cold determination to ensure justice. For what it's worth, Melissa said quietly, I'm sorry. Your apology means nothing to me, I replied, not unkindly. But your cooperation could mean everything to the innocent employees whose retirement funds Daniel and James have been pillaging. She straightened, professional resolve replacing personal discomfort. What do you need from me? Access to the financial documents you've already gathered, testimony about what you've observed, and most immediately, your agreement not to alert Daniel or James that we've spoken." She nodded slowly. "The documents are on a secure drive in my apartment. I can get them to you tonight." "Not to me," I corrected, sliding a business card across the table. "To him. Howard Keller, forensic accountant. He's working with my attorney. As..." She pocketed the card. Her phone buzzed loudly. She glanced at it, her face paling further. "It's Daniel. He wants to meet. Tonight." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Where?" "The office. He says he wants to discuss my concerns about the pension fund. You can't go. If I don't, he'll know something's wrong." I considered our options, aware that each minute increased the risk of Daniel destroying crucial evidence. An idea formed. Dangerous, possibly foolish, but potentially effective. "Go," I said finally. "But wear this." I removed a small object from my bag, a button-sized recording device paired to my phone. "And I'll be nearby. At the first sign of trouble, I'll call the police." She hesitated, then took the device. "Why are you trusting me with this? How do you know I won't warn him?" "Because whatever you feel for Daniel, you're not a criminal, and now you know exactly what he's been doing." I met her gaze directly. "The question is, can I trust you to do the right thing?" Something shifted in her expression, determination replacing fear. "Yes, you can." As we finalized the details of our impromptu operation, I felt a strange camaraderie forming with the woman who had helped destroy my marriage. Life's ironies never ceased to amaze me. Before she left, Melissa turned back to me. "He never deserved either of us, did he?" I didn't answer. Some truths were too obvious to need stating. The offices of Morgan and James Architects occupied the 15th floor of a sleek glass tower in Boston's Innovation District. At 10:30 p.m., the building was mostly empty, the security guard barely glancing at Melissa's employee badge as she entered. I waited in my car across the street, the feed from her recording device coming through clearly on my phone. Sanders and his colleague were positioned in an unmarked vehicle at the other entrance, ready to intervene if necessary. Through the phone, I heard the elevator doors open, then Melissa's footsteps across the marble lobby of the firm. The sound of a security door unlocking, more footsteps, then Daniel's voice. "Melissa, thanks for coming so late. You said it was important, about my questions earlier." I could hear the caution in her tone. Professional, not personal. Good, she was following our plan. "Yes, let's talk in my office. More private." More footsteps, a door closing. I tensed, wondering if Daniel would sweep his office for recording devices. It was a risk we'd had to take. "Drink?" Daniel offered. "No, thank you. I'd prefer to discuss the pension fund discrepancies." A pause, then the sound of ice cubes clinking in glass. Daniel fixing a drink for himself. "About that," he began, his tone deliberately casual. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The transfers you noticed were temporary, just moving funds around to manage cash flow while we wait for the Seattle investors to release the next payment installment." "That's not what the records show," Melissa replied steadily. "The pension fund is short nearly $4 million, Daniel. Money that belongs to your employees." Another pause, longer this time. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had hardened. "Who else have you discussed this with?" "No one yet. I wanted to hear your explanation first." "Good. That's good." The sound of him setting down his glass. "Because there's a simple explanation. One I'm sure you'll understand." "I'm listening." "The Seattle project is going to make this firm, Melissa, international recognition, a doubling of our client base, partner status for me, everything we've talked about for our future. That doesn't explain the missing funds. We hit some unexpected challenges, cost overruns, permit issues. If we'd disclosed them to the investors, they would have pulled out. I made a judgment call. a temporary reallocation to bridge the gap until the project generates revenue. That's fraud, Daniel. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction to her direct accusation. It's business, he countered, his voice hardening further. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. I'm protecting everyone's jobs, including yours. By stealing their retirement money? The sound of a fist hitting a desk. I am not stealing. I'm borrowing. The money will be replaced. Every penny. When? Once the Seattle project is complete and the final payments come in. 6 months, max. And if there are more unexpected challenges? More delays? More cost overruns? Silence, then the sound of Daniel moving around the room. Why are you pushing this, Mel? This isn't like you. Finding out the man I love is committing fraud isn't exactly a normal day for me. Look. Daniel's voice softened, taking on the persuasive tone I knew all too well. I know this seems questionable from the outside, but I'm asking you to trust me. Have I ever let you down? You're asking me to be complicit in a federal crime. I'm asking you to be patient, to keep this between us until I can fix it. Through the phone, I heard what sounded like Daniel moving closer to her. Think about our future, Mel. Everything we've planned. Once I make partner, we'll have everything we've talked about. The house in Nantucket, the trips to Europe, children, if you want them. My stomach twisted at his words. The same dreams he'd once promised me. And what about your wife? Melissa asked, her voice steady, a dismissive sound. That's already decided. After the Seattle project launches, I'll tell her it's over. She'll get the house, a generous settlement. She'll be fine. And if she fights you on it? Daniel laughed. That same cold laugh I'd heard on the recordings. Sophia? She's practical to a fault. Always has been. No drama, no messiness. It's why I married her. She'll want a clean break just as much as I do. I felt an odd sense of déjà vu, hearing him repeat almost verbatim what he'd told Melissa in my living room weeks ago. So what? Are you asking me to do, exactly? Melissa pressed. Nothing. Just don't mention your concerns to anyone else. Give me time to fix this. 6 months. That's all I need. And the auditors? They've already found discrepancies. James is handling that. Some creative explanations, some adjusted records. Standard practice. Falsifying financial records is not standard practice, Daniel. Another long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had changed. Colder, more calculating. I need to know I can count on you, Melissa. That we're in this together. What does that mean exactly? It means that if this gets out, we all go down. Me, James, the firm, and anyone who knew about it. The threat was unmistakable. I gripped my phone tighter, signaling Sanders with my other hand. This was escalating exactly as we'd feared. You threatening me? Melissa's voice remained admirably steady. I'm stating facts. We're all connected now. Your career, our future, everything we've worked for. It all depends on this staying quiet until the Seattle money comes in. I need to think about this. There's nothing to think about, Daniel insisted, his voice hardening again. You're either with me or you're not. And if you're not... The silence that followed was more threatening than any words could have been. If I'm not? Melissa prompted. Let's not find out. Please, Mel, just trust me on this. 6 months. That's all I'm asking. I heard movement, likely Daniel approaching her, then the sound of papers rustling. What's this? Melissa asked. Your bonus. Officially for your work on the Richardson project. Unofficially, a gesture of good faith between us. You're trying to buy my silence? Her disbelief was palpable, even through the audio. I'm compensating. You for your discretion? $200,000, Mel. Tax-free, deposited to an offshore account James set up. Enough for a down payment on that house in Beacon Hill you've been eyeing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Daniel wasn't just trying to silence Melissa. He was actively drawing her into his criminal enterprise. I don't want your money, Melissa said, her voice tight. Don't be naive. Everyone has a price. Not me. Not for this. Daniel's tone changed. Again, frustration replacing persuasion. What do you want then? Partnership track? Done? More creative control? It's yours. Just tell me what it takes to make this go away. Go away. It doesn't work like that, Daniel. You can't just… Fine. I tried to be reasonable. The sound of a drawer opening and closing. You know, it's interesting. The paperwork shows you had system access to the pension accounts on the dates of several transfers, your credentials, your login times. My blood ran cold. He was setting her up to take the fall. That's impossible. I never accessed those accounts. The logs say otherwise. James was very thorough. You're framing me? The disbelief in her voice matched my own horror. I prefer to think of it as insurance. You go down, we all go down. So let's make sure nobody goes down, shall we? The audio crackled with movement. Someone standing suddenly, a chair scraping back. I think we're done here, Melissa said, her voice hard with anger. Sit down, Melissa. We're not finished. Yes, we are. With this conversation and with whatever we had personally, I won't be threatened or bribed. More movement, fast footsteps. Don't. Walk away from me! Daniel's voice had lost all its smoothness, raw anger breaking through. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm leaving, and tomorrow, I'm going to the board with everything I know. You do that, and I'll make sure they see evidence of your involvement. Every transaction has your digital fingerprints on it. They're forgeries. Prove it. By the time this reaches any kind of investigation, the original logs will be long gone. I signaled Sanders urgently. This had gone from threatening to dangerous. Get out of my way, Daniel. Melissa's voice was tight with controlled fear. Not until you understand what's at stake. A scuffling sound, then a crash, something hitting the floor. Let go of me. Melissa's voice had risen, genuine alarm evident now. I was already out of the car, Sanders and his colleague rushing toward the building entrance. Through my phone, I could hear what sounded like a struggle. You're not going anywhere until we reach an understanding, Daniel growled. Then abruptly, a new sound. The office door opening. What the hell is going on here? A new voice, male, authoritative. James. He wasn't supposed to be there. Perfect timing, Daniel said, sounding relieved. Melissa was just leaving. After agreeing to our arrangement. Weren't you, Mel? Silence. I could imagine her trapped between them, calculating her options. Actually, she finally said, her voice surprisingly strong. I was just explaining to Daniel that I have copies of all the fraudulent transfers, secured in multiple locations, and that if anything happens to me, they go directly to the SEC. A bluff, but a brilliant one. I found myself respecting her quick thinking. You're bluffing, James said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Check your email. I sent myself documentation weeks ago when I first noticed the discrepancies. Didn't I mention that, Daniel? The tension in the silence that followed was almost unbearable as I raced toward the building entrance, flashing Lisa's legal credentials to the startled security guard. Let her go, James finally said. We need to regroup, think this through. She'll go straight to the authorities, Daniel protested. Not tonight, she won't, James replied, his voice coldly practical. And by tomorrow, we'll have a better solution. Let her go. More silence, then the sound of footsteps retreating. This isn't over, Daniel said, his voice distant now. For us it is, Melissa replied, and I heard her rapid footsteps heading toward what I hoped was the exit. I reached the elevator just as the doors opened, revealing a disheveled Melissa, her eyes wide with adrenaline. She froze when she saw me. You heard? She asked. I nodded, pulling her quickly toward the stairwell where Sanders was waiting. Every word. You were brilliant. He was going to… Her voice broke. I know. but he didn't. And now, we have everything we need. As Sanders ushered us toward the building's side exit, I glanced back at the elevator. Soon Daniel would discover I wasn't at home, that his careful plans were unraveling. Part of me wanted to confront him now, to see his face when he realized how completely I'd outmaneuvered him. But there would be time for that. Tonight was about securing evidence and ensuring safety. Tomorrow would be about justice. And as I helped a still-shaking Melissa into Sanders' waiting car, I realized something unexpected. In trying to warn my husband's mistress about danger, I had found something I'd been missing for months: my own strength. The hidden camera footage hadn't just changed everything about my marriage. It had changed me. Dawn broke over Boston Harbor as I sat in Lisa Chen's conference room, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, both personal and professional. Melissa sat across from me, looking exhausted but resolute, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. "The judge signed the emergency orders," Lisa announced, sliding a stack of legal documents across the table to me. "Asset freeze for both Daniel and James, personally and professionally. Effective immediately," I nodded, feeling strangely detached. In the past 12 hours, my focus had shifted entirely from my failed marriage to preventing a financial crime that would devastate dozens of innocent people. FBI agents will execute search warrants at the firm and both their residences simultaneously. At 9 a.m., Sanders explained. "We've coordinated to ensure they can't destroy any additional evidence." I glanced at my watch. 7:38 a.m. Less than an hour and a half until Daniel's world imploded. "He's been calling me all night," Melissa said, checking her phone. 27 missed calls, dozens of texts alternating between threats and apologies. I checked my own phone and found a similar pattern, messages from Daniel growing increasingly frantic as the night progressed. 42 p.m. "Working late. Don't wait up." 37 a.m. "Where are you? Called the house. No answer." 51 a.m. "Whatever you think you know, we need to discuss it first. Call me." The last message had come just 20 minutes. "I'm coming home. We need to talk. Now." I showed the messages to Lisa. "He knows something's wrong. He suspects. But he doesn't know what you know," she corrected. A knock at the conference room door interrupted us. Lisa's assistant entered, looking apologetic. "Mr. Morgan is in the lobby," she announced, "demanding to see Mrs. Morgan. He says he knows she's here." My heart rate accelerated, but the panic I expected didn't materialize. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. "I want to see him," I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. Lisa studied me carefully. "Are you sure that's wise?" "It doesn't matter if it's wise. It's necessary." I turned to Sanders. "Can you ensure he doesn't have the opportunity to harm me?" Sanders nodded. "We'll set up in the adjacent conference room. First sign of trouble, we intervene." As the others moved to the connecting conference room, Melissa hesitated. "Should I stay?" she asked. I considered it, then shook my head. "No. This is between him and me now." She nodded, surprising me by briefly squeezing my hand before following the others. Alone in the vast conference room, I positioned myself at the head of the table, surrounded by stacks of evidence, a visual representation of Daniel's crimes that he couldn't possibly miss. Then I texted Lisa's assistant, "Send him in." When the door finally opened, the man who entered barely resembled the polished, confident architect I'd been married to for 5 years. Daniel looked wrecked, his normally immaculate hair disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled and partially untucked, his eyes bloodshot from what I assumed was a combination of alcohol and panic. He froze just inside the doorway, taking in the scene, me at the head of the table, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, calm and collected while he fell apart. "Sophia," he began, his voice hoarse. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all night. I know, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I've been busy. His eyes darted around the conference room, lingering on the stacks of financial documents, the printed email exchanges, the external hard drives. What is all this? He asked, though his expression told me he already knew. Evidence? I answered simply. Of everything. He took a halting step forward. Whatever Melissa told you. Melissa didn't tell me anything, I interrupted. At least, not at first. I discovered your affair on our anniversary. The messages on your phone that you thought I'd never see. A flicker of guilt crossed his face, quickly replaced by calculation. Sophia, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, Daniel. Creative accounting, temporary reallocations, necessary risks. I gestured to the documents surrounding me. You have an explanation for everything, don't you? He paled visibly. How much do you know? Everything, I replied, watching his face carefully. The affair, the fraud, the missing pension funds, the Seattle project built on lies. Your plans. To frame Melissa if she exposed you. All of it. He sank into the chair opposite me, the last of his composure crumbling. How? Hidden cameras, I said, allowing myself a small, cold smile. In our home. For 3 weeks after I found those messages. I heard every conversation, Daniel. Every plan. Every lie. His face contorted with disbelief. You recorded me? In our home? That's illegal. The audacity of his indignation almost made me laugh. Really? You're concerned about the legality of my actions? You who stole millions from your employees' retirement accounts? It's not that simple, he protested weakly. Actually, it is that simple. It's fraud, Daniel. Federal crimes with mandatory prison sentences. He leaned forward, desperation replacing shock. Sophia, listen to me. The Seattle project will work. Once it's complete, all the money goes back. No one gets hurt. I just need time. Time for what? To continue lying? To keep betraying everyone who trusted you? I shook my head. It's over, Daniel. At 9 a.m., FBI agents will execute search warrants at your office, our home, and James's residence. The firm's assets have been frozen. Your personal accounts, too. The blood drained from his face. You can't do this. I already have. He surged, to his feet, anger flashing in his eyes. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed everything. The firm, our future. No, Daniel, I cut him off sharply. You destroyed everything. The moment you decided that your ambition was more important than your integrity. The moment you chose to risk other people's futures for your own gain. This isn't just about me, he argued, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. 38 people work at that firm. They'll all lose their jobs if this goes public. They've already lost their retirement savings, I countered. Thanks to you? I was going to fix it, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I didn't flinch. With what? More fraud? More lies? More creative accounting? The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. He slumped back into the chair, his shoulders sagging in defeat. What do you want? He asked quietly. Money? The house? Name your price. There must be some way to resolve this privately. I studied the man I'd once loved, searching for any trace of the person I thought I'd married. There was none. This isn't a negotiation, Daniel. It's a reckoning. Because I cheated? He asked incredulously. You're destroying both our lives over an affair? No, I replied, my voice steady. The affair simply opened my eyes to who you really are. The man who could betray me so completely in our marriage is the same man who could betray his employees, his partner, his investors. Your character is consistent, Daniel, even if your accounts aren't. He laughed bitterly. Always the noble one. Aren't you? Saint Sophia, protecting the innocent. Someone has to. Another silence fell, this one heavier than the last. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer, almost pleading. We had good times, didn't we? It wasn't all a lie. The unexpected vulnerability caught me off guard, stirring memories I'd suppressed during the past few weeks. Our first date in the rain, dancing in our kitchen while dinner burned, quiet Sunday mornings reading the paper together. I don't know anymore, I answered honestly. Was any of it real, or was I just a convenient cover for your ambitions? It was real, he insisted. In the beginning, it was real. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I believed him? That it mattered? Daniel checked his watch, a flicker of desperate calculation, crossing his face. I need to make some calls before this happens. Your phones have been monitored since midnight, I informed him. Any attempt to destroy evidence or move assets will only add to the charges. He stared at me, genuine shock, evident in his expression. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I learned from the best. You always said attention to detail was crucial in your work. A mirthless smile twisted his lips. Using my own lessons against me. Poetic. Just practical. Always have been. According to you. Daniel stood again, this time without the aggressive energy of before. He looked diminished somehow. The powerful architect reduced to a man facing the collapse of his carefully constructed facade. Is there anything I can say to change your mind? He asked, an edge of genuine desperation in his voice. No, I replied, finally. Some things can't be fixed with words, Daniel. Some betrayals go too deep. He nodded slowly, accepting the finality of my answer. What about Melissa? Is she part of this? She's cooperating fully with the authorities, I said, deliberately vague. Once she understood what you were really doing, she made her choice. You should go, I said, glancing at my watch. The FBI will be arriving at our home in less than 30 minutes. He took a step toward me, then stopped when I tensed visibly. For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I replied calmly. And you were willing to hurt countless others to protect yourself. Your intentions don't matter anymore, Daniel, only your actions. He lingered for a moment longer, as if waiting for me to soften, to offer some last-minute reprieve. When none came, he turned toward the door. Goodbye, Sophia, he said without looking back. Goodbye, Daniel, I replied, surprised by the lack of emotion in my voice. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that, 5 years of marriage ended. Not with dramatic accusations or tearful pleas, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Morgan and Associates, the restructured firm that had risen from the ashes of my husband's crimes. As the newly appointed trustee of the Employee Recovery Fund, I had just finished presenting the final settlement package to the 36 employees whose retirement savings Daniel and James had pillaged. The recovery had been more successful than anyone anticipated. Between the asset seizures, the sale of the firm's legitimate holdings, and my donation of my share of our marital assets, we'd managed to restore 94% of the stolen funds. Mrs. Morgan, said Edward Hayes, a structural engineer who'd been with the firm for 20 years, we can't thank you enough. When the scandal broke, we thought we'd lost everything. I smiled, still not accustomed to being viewed as the hero of this story, rather than its victim. It's Ms. Chen now, actually, and I'm just glad we were able to make things right. As the employees filed out, Melissa remained behind, no longer the other woman in my mind, but my unexpected ally in ensuring justice was served. Her testimony had been crucial in the federal case against Daniel and James, who had both ultimately accepted plea deals rather than face trial. Daniel was serving 4 years in a minimum security prison. James had received a lighter sentence, 18 months, in exchange for his cooperation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The brilliant architect who had designed award-winning buildings now confined to a cell smaller than our guest bathroom. The Seattle project is finally moving forward, Melissa said, gathering her notes from the presentation. The new investors are committed to completing it according to Daniel's original vision, just with ethical financing this time. I nodded, appreciating the symmetry. Daniel's grandest design would be realized, though he wouldn't profit from it or receive credit. Sometimes justice had a poetry all its own. You didn't have to do all this, Melissa observed quietly. You could have just divorced him, taken your settlement, and walked away. I considered her words, thinking back to that morning when I'd found those text messages. How easy it would have been to confront Daniel immediately, to rage and weep and demand a divorce. How differently things might have unfolded if I'd reacted from pure emotion, rather than strategic patience. I couldn't walk away, I replied. Not once I knew what was at stake for everyone else involved. As we left the building together, an unlikely friendship forged through shared betrayal, I thought about the lessons of the past 6 months. How sometimes the most devastating discoveries can become catalysts for necessary change. How the truth, however painful, offers the only solid foundation for rebuilding. The hidden cameras that had revealed Daniel's betrayal had also revealed my own strength, a resilience I might never have discovered otherwise. In seeking to document his dishonesty, I had inadvertently documented my own transformation from trusting wife to determined advocate for justice. "What's next for you?" Melissa asked as we reached the street. I looked up at the clear October sky, feeling the crisp autumn breeze on my face. For the first time in years, my future wasn't tethered to someone else's plans or expectations. The possibilities stretched before me, limitless and entirely my own. I don't know exactly, I admitted, but for once, that feels like freedom, not uncertainty. As I walked away, I realized the hidden camera footage hadn't just changed everything about my marriage, it had changed everything about me. And for that unexpected gift, I was strangely, paradoxically grateful. 9 days after Daniel's arrest, I sat alone in the empty conference room of Lisa Chen's law office, watching rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows. The media frenzy had been relentless. Architect of Deception screamed one headline. House of Cards, Morgan's empire collapses, declared another. Every aspect of our lives had been dissected, analyzed, and speculated upon by strangers who knew nothing of the quiet devastation behind the salacious headlines. "The arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Lisa said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. "Daniel's attorney has reached out about a potential plea deal. I accepted the coffee but couldn't bring myself to drink it. Already? It's been barely a week. The evidence is overwhelming. Even the best defense attorney can't make $4 million in misappropriated pension funds disappear." She sat beside me, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "They're hoping to minimize jail time." "And James?" Singing like a canary. "He's offered testimony against Daniel in exchange for leniency." I wasn't surprised. The partnership had crumbled as quickly as their friendship when faced with the prospect of prison. Honor among thieves was always a convenient fiction. "What about the employees?" I asked, focusing on what mattered most to me now. "The people whose retirement savings were stolen?" Lisa opened a folder. "The asset freeze was effective. We've secured approximately 60% of the missing funds already. The remainder," she hesitated, "will likely never be recovered." I finished for her. She nodded grimly. "Unless the Seattle project miraculously becomes profitable under new management, which is unlikely given its fundamentally flawed financials, the pension fund will suffer significant losses." I stared into my untouched coffee, watching ripples form as my hand trembled slightly. 38 employees, receptionists, drafters, junior architects, maintenance staff, people who had trusted their futures to Daniel's firm, now facing diminished retirements through no fault of their own. What if I contributed my divorce settlement? I asked suddenly. "Whatever I'm entitled to from our marital assets, Could that help offset their losses? Lisa looked startled. Sophia, that's not your responsibility. You're a victim in this too. Am I, though? I set down the coffee cup. I shared his life, his home, his success. I benefited from his firm's profits, never questioning where the money came from or how it was made. You didn't know. I should have known, I interrupted, the weight of unintentional complicity heavy on my shoulders. Those people trusted Daniel just like I did. The difference is, I have legal recourse. I have my own career, my own earning potential. Some of them are in their 60s with no time to rebuild what they've lost. Lisa studied me for a long moment. It would substantially reduce your financial security. The house, the investments, essentially, everything except your personal savings and career earnings. I don't want the house, I said firmly. I can't imagine living there now. And I don't want money that's tainted by fraud, even indirectly. After a moment, she nodded. I'll have my team draw up the necessary paperwork. It's unusually generous, but legally feasible. It's not generosity, I corrected her. It's atonement, maybe. Or just doing what's right. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Nothing like the grand, dramatic spaces depicted in television dramas. I sat in the back row, dressed conservatively in a navy suit, hoping to avoid attention. Daniel hadn't seen me yet. He sat beside his attorney at the defendant's table, shoulders hunched in a posture of defeat I'd never witnessed before. When the bailiff called the court to order, Daniel finally turned, scanning the gallery. Our eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away, shame or anger, possibly both, flashing across his face. The proceedings moved with surprising efficiency. Charges read, pleas entered, bail arrangements modified. Daniel pleaded not guilty, despite the overwhelming evidence and James's cooperation with prosecutors. His attorney immediately requested a sidebar with the judge and prosecutor, presumably to continue plea negotiations despite the formal plea. As they conferred in hushed tones, I felt someone sit beside me. Turning, I was surprised to find Melissa, Kincaid, looking pale but composed in a simple gray dress. I didn't expect to see you here, I said quietly. I'm scheduled to give my deposition this afternoon, she replied, her voice barely audible, about the financial discrepancies I discovered and… She hesitated. And your relationship with my husband, I finished for her. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the awkward words at the hotel bar. I should have hated her. This woman had shared my husband's bed, listened to his promises about their future together, participated in the destruction of my marriage. Yet sitting beside her in that sterile courtroom, I felt only a weary recognition of our shared manipulation. He lied to both of us, I said finally, just in different ways. But I knew he was married, she insisted. I knew about you, and I chose to believe him anyway when he said your marriage was over in all but name. All but the classic excuse of the other woman. I'd heard variations of it before from friends whose husbands had strayed. The marriage was already dead. They were staying together for appearances. They hadn't been intimate in years. Before I could respond, the sidebar concluded. Daniel returned to his seat, noticeably paler than before. The defendant has reconsidered his plea, the judge announced. The court will now hear the revised plea. Daniel stood stiffly. Guilty, Your Honor. The judge nodded, unsurprised. The court accepts your plea. Sentencing will be scheduled following completion of the pre-sentencing investigation. And just like that, it was over. No dramatic confrontation, no impassioned testimony, no tearful confessions. Just the quiet capitulation of a man who had finally run out of lies. As the bailiff led Daniel away, he looked back once more, his eyes finding mine in the gallery. What passed between us in that moment wasn't love or even hatred, but something more profound. A mutual recognition that the people we had been to each other no longer existed. 3 months later, a small group gathered in Lisa Chen's conference room, the same room where I'd confronted Daniel on that fateful morning. The attendees included representatives from the Employee Pension Fund, the court-appointed trustee overseeing the firm's dissolution, Howard Keller, and, surprisingly, Melissa Kincaid, who had proven instrumental in untangling the complex web of financial deception. "The final settlement agreement is ready for your signature," Lisa explained, sliding a thick document across the table to me. "Once executed, your entire interest in the marital assets will be transferred to the Employee Recovery Trust." I scanned. The detailed financial summary. The total value was substantial, nearly $2 million in equity from the house, investment accounts, and my share of Daniel's ownership in the firm, which, despite its current disgrace, still retained some value in its intellectual property and ongoing projects. "And this will restore what percentage of their losses?" I asked Howard. "Combined with the assets already recovered and James's cooperation agreement, approximately 92%, he replied. "Far better than anyone anticipated." I signed without hesitation, each signature releasing me from the material entanglements of my marriage to Daniel. With the final flourish of my pen, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. "It's done," Lisa announced, collecting the documents. "Sophia, are you sure about this?" "There's still time to—" "I'm sure," I interrupted gently. "It's the right thing to do." After the others filed out, Melissa lingered, clearly wanting to speak privately. In the month since Daniel's plea, we'd developed an unusual rapport, not friendship exactly, but a shared understanding born from parallel betrayals. "I've been offered a position with the firm handling the Seattle project restructuring," she said once we were alone. "They want someone who understands the design vision but isn't tainted by the financial scandal." "That's wonderful," I replied, sincerely. "You deserve it. Your testimony saved a lot of people from much worse losses." She hesitated, then asked the question I sensed had been on her mind for months. "Have you visited him?" I shook my head. Daniel had been sentenced to 4 years in a minimum security federal prison in western Massachusetts. He'd written several letters, which remained unopened in my desk drawer. "I don't know what to say to him," I admitted, "or what I would even want to hear." "I understand," she said quietly. "I haven't either, though for different reasons." An awkward silence fell between us, two women connected by a man who had betrayed them both, now trying to navigate the aftermath of his destruction. "What will you do now?" she finally asked. It was a question everyone had been asking. Family, friends, colleagues. What would I do now that my marriage was over, my home sold, my financial reserves significantly depleted? How would I rebuild from the wreckage Daniel had left behind? "I've accepted a position with International Justice Alliance," I told her. They needed an attorney specializing in financial crime litigation. Her eyebrows rose. "That's quite a change. From corporate law." "It turns out I have relevant experience," I said with a wry smile. "And perspective that most corporate attorneys lack." She nodded, understanding immediately. "You'll be excellent at it." As we parted in the lobby, she hesitated again, then said, "For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. Most people would have just taken the divorce settlement and tried to forget the whole thing." "I couldn't forget," I replied honestly, "but I could try to make something meaningful from it." 1 year to the day after finding those text messages on our anniversary, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking Boston Common. It was smaller than the Beacon Hill house, simpler, but entirely mine, untainted by memories or betrayal. Copy of the Boston Business Journal lay open on the small bistro table, featuring an article about the successful reorganization of Daniel's firm under new management. The employees had retained their jobs, the pension fund had been restored, the Seattle project had been scaled back to realistic proportions. From the ashes of Daniel's fraud, something sustainable had emerged. Daniel himself remained in prison, now 15 months into his 4-year sentence. His most recent letter had arrived yesterday, the first I'd actually opened. There were no excuses this time, no attempts at explanation or justification. Just a simple acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused and the lives he'd damaged. Too little. Too late. But something at least. My phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Dinner still on for tonight? The Italian place at 7? I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. My sister had been my rock throughout the ordeal, offering unwavering support without judgment. Tonight we were celebrating my promotion at the International Justice Alliance, where I'd spent the past 9 months helping victims of financial fraud recover their losses. As the evening light gilded the city skyline, I reflected on the strange, twisted path that had led me here. 1 year ago, I'd been a betrayed wife, discovering text messages that shattered my world. Today, I was using that experience to help others find their own justice. The hidden camera footage had revealed more than just Daniel's betrayal. It had revealed my own capacity for strategic patience, for righteous determination, for resilience in the face of devastating loss. In seeking to document his lies, I had inadvertently documented my own transformation. I no longer defined myself as Daniel Morgan's wife, or even his ex-wife. I was simply Sophia Chen, attorney, advocate, survivor. The woman who had turned private, betrayal into public justice. The woman who had found, in the wreckage of her marriage, the blueprint for a more meaningful life. The hidden camera footage had changed everything, indeed. Most importantly, it had changed me.